Hey everyone, my name is Lizzie and today we'll be talking about white wine. I've tried making white wine time and time again, and every time, you guessed it, I failed. So this time I wanted to make sure that I got it right. So what are the changes that I'm making? Well, first of all, I don't know about you guys, but where do you find this white juice without preservatives? I've been looking in multiple grocery stores and I always see some with preservatives until one day I found one that's written no preservatives. So you guessed it, I took this and tried to make white wine with it. And in order to make white wine, so you need the juice, you need a little sugar, you need a little yeast, and the yeast that I used is EC1118, and I used a little bit of yeast nutrients. So as I was reading the label, because you never know, I wanted to check, and indeed I did not see any sulfites, therefore no preservatives. However, there's one thing that caught my attention, and it was citric acid. So citric acid is a preservative. Therefore, always read the label. You never know what actual ingredients you'll find in the juice unless you read the label, because it did say no preservatives in front. So what is citric acid? Citric acid has been reported to be a yeast inhibitor. Therefore, it must be the culprit for why my white wine did not work. And by not work, I mean that there was a little bit of alcohol. However, it didn't taste like white wine. By white wine, I'm talking about Moscato, which is one of the sweeter ones, or even the more dry white wine. And this is because the yeast is being inhibited. When the yeast is inhibited, it cannot eat all the sugar and cannot transform the sugar into alcohol. Therefore, the sugar is just floating there and nothing is eating it. So your drink is going to be sweeter. And this is indeed how it tasted. So I tried this white wine and it was way too sweet to be considered white wine. It was considered more of an alcoholic liqueur that had the same color as white wine. However, the taste wasn't there. Contrarily to red wine, when I make red wine, it actually tastes like store-bought red wine. The white wine, it's a challenging process. So going back to citric acid, what else is citric acid other than a yeast inhibitor? Citric acid is actually added to really acidic liquids to neutralize them. And this is in link to the pH. The optimal pH for the yeast to thrive is at 5.2. Therefore, if it's too acidic, you don't want that. You want your juice to remain at the optimal pH of 5.2. And for those that like a little statistics, citric acid reduces yeast growth by 64 to 88%. It inhibits microbial growth. And what is considered a microbe? A microbe is an organism that can be seen through a microscope. This includes bacteria, protozoa, algae, and fungus. And this fungus category is where the yeast is. Yeast is a fungus and citric acid inhibits the fungus growth. Not only did I see citric acid, but also sodium citrate. That did sound like a preservative. And how do I identify preservatives? It's basically the ingredients that you don't understand, that you can't really pick beside an apple at the grocery store. They sound more scientific. Citric, for example, sulfites. So it's not your typical grocery store items. And what this other preservative is, sodium citrate, is actually the salt part of the citric acid. Salt, which is also a yeast inhibitor, therefore it's a no-go. Both citric acid and sodium citrate, bad for the yeast, and that's why the wine did not ferment until the end. I'll just let it ferment for a little bit longer, because once I made red wine, sometimes it takes a little longer to ferment depending on the temperature. So now that we've turned the heating off, since we're in spring, the slow fermentation could be due to a lower temperature. So I mixed the fermenting jar and I'm just waiting for this yeast to do its magic. And by magic, by eating the sugar that's present to convert it into alcohol. And I'm gonna wait a couple of weeks to a month more, since once I did that with red wine, initially it was too sweet and I thought that the fermentation was stuck. However, I just let it ferment for a few weeks longer and then the taste started reflecting red wine taste. So sometimes you just need to leave yeast a little bit of time to do its work. However, if you're impatient and you want to make sure that your juice and all your ingredients work to make alcohol, avoid citric acid and sodium citrate. The only two preservatives that you can accept when making these alcohol is ascorbic acid, which is vitamin C, and malic acid, which represents sourness. And since citric acid is a microbe inhibitor, does that mean when you have mold in the walls, you can wash it with citric acid? Let me know in the comments below if you've ever used citric acid to get rid of moldy walls. Another thing about sodium citrate is that it's a flavor enhancer, which would make sense. Usually when you add salt to food, it enhances the flavor. Going back to alcohol, what are the potential solutions that we can use to make white wine? If shaking the fermenting jar doesn't work, I would shake it to invigorate the yeast and make it eat the sugar. If that doesn't work, I could also wrap a scarf around it or put it in a warmer environment so the yeast gets activated. And one thing that I haven't done before is add more yeast nutrients. By adding more yeast nutrients, this would invigorate the yeast to act faster. So maybe if I add enough, it would accelerate the process and overpower the preservatives. However, I haven't done this before. So drop me a comment below and let me know if adding a lot more yeast nutrients helps accelerate the alcohol making process, and does it change the flavor? But for the time being, the white wine is still incomplete, and I will be searching for more juice options that are white and that have no preservatives except ascorbic and malic acid. So if you know any of these juices and brands, just let me know in the comments below, because I've been searching without avail and they should be available. I would assume other people have made white wine. The only criteria for the juice is that it's white and it resembles white wine. And in order for it to stay white, the sugar that I use is white sugar. I would avoid yellow sugar or brown sugar because it's going to darken your liquid and it will no longer look like white wine. However, it'll look like a darker liquid. And if you found this video valuable, share with a friend. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and follow us on Instagram on Alcohol You Back. We post more content on that platform, and I'll see you in the next video.